A vague disclaimer is no one's friend. This podcast will look at episodes in relation to Buffy and Angel as a whole, and therefore contains spoilers for the entirety of both series. If you haven't seen all of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel the series, go and watch them before you listen to this. Remember, you've been warned.
The hardest thing in this world is to live in it.
That's why there's us, champions. We live as though the world were as it should be, to show it what it can be.
The Earth is definitely doomed.
It's Tuesday, so it must be time to return to the Hellmouth. We're going through the Buffyverse episode by episode, and a look back at Joss Whedon's iconic shows. I'm MC, and I'm here with...
It is Andy. Hello.
And it is David.
And I'm Logan.
This week we are talking about Consequences, which is episode 15 of season 3, the second part of the Bad Girls two-parter, and it was written by Marty Noxon and directed by Michael Gershman, and originally aired February 16th, 1999. The first thing I have to notice when I was actually putting down the writer and director information is that, wow, this really is not as good as Passion.
I thought there was definitely some pretty shots and some decent, it's solid direction.
Yeah.
I think the writing is not, I think the writing's not up to par to Gershman's nice visual directing.
That might be the big part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we start out with Buffy having a nightmare about Finch pulling her down in the water, and then when she pops up, then Faith is the one pushing her down. And obviously we usually only get a Buffy dream sequence when it's a prophecy. So I was trying to figure out, is this a prophecy or is this just Buffy's guilt? It could actually be 6-1, honestly. But I think, personally for me, I think it's her own guilt, which is one of my big problems with this episode.
I didn't read it as guilt. I definitely read it as like an actual nightmare rather than a precognitive nightmare. I didn't read it as guilt. I read it as just nightmare fueled by just the situation she's in.
One of my largest issues with this episode, as MC said, is Buffy's guilt. Mm-hmm. On one hand, I get it. On the other hand, I think her guilt in her how she's sort of complicit in Finch's murder is compounded by her guilt over how they've not done their best by Faith. And I think it's a little too late at this point.
Yeah.
And we will obviously get into it further as we get into the episode, but I feel like oftentimes when Buffy is talking to Faith, she seems to be getting lost in her own feelings, and she's she's projecting her own feelings onto Faith and not actually taking the time to think about how Faith feels.
I think through the episode, she sees Faith more clearly than she has in the past. But yeah, she's definitely, a lot of what motivates her in this episode is her own guilt instead of the psychological damage that Faith is experiencing.
There's a lot of them basically talking to walls, and the walls being each other.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like that through a lot of this episode. They're just talking to a wall, and you can't talk to a wall. You know what I mean? Like, it's a weird episode for me.
Yeah.
And I think some of the acting doesn't even work.
Yeah.
Because it is that wall thing, which is set up badly in the writing, not by the actors that are usually so fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? The dialogue just doesn't lend itself to a give and take of acting. And you can see them all really trying to do it, but it's really hard to do that when you're not given the tools to do it. And so I found that some of the acting was flat. I also found that Buffy's freaking pajamas in that first scene are adorable.
They are.
So
they're not yummy sushi pajamas, but
they're not the yummy
close.
sushi pajamas, which are the best pajamas. But
who actually wears pajama sets?
Buffy
and Joyce, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, that would make sense.
Which I do. I have a pajama set that says treat yourself.
Oh, nice.
Because why wouldn't I? Parks and Rec people.
Shout out to Donna Meagle.
Speaking of Joyce, collect that paycheck, Christine Sutherland, because she's just kind of standing there. But we get, Buffy finds out who Finch is through Joyce watching a news report. I am a bit bothered by the timeline in this episode, but we can get further into that later. But we get to the credits, and Wesley wants Faith and Buffy to investigate the murder of Alan Finch.
Wesley wants to stake his claim.
Yeah.
And look at the costuming there. Giles has no jacket and his vest is unbuttoned. I mean, I'm fine with that. But you know what I mean? Like they're obviously trying to do a contrast.
Yeah.
Of course. Yes.
There. So with Wesley in that very boxy
90s.
Oh yes, it is a very 90s cut. Giles' stuff is a little more classic, even with the tweed. You know what I mean? It's like English classic, but the boxy suit on Wesley, blah.
Wesley looks like someone just told him greed is good.
Okay. Something I must mention, though. So Wesley wants Faith and Buffy to investigate the murder because he thinks that it might involve the supernatural. Wesley's right.
Yep.
Wesley is completely right because it's frickin' Sunnydale. If there's a murder in Sunnydale, it tends to have supernatural. I mean, if Buffy and Faith had not been the ones to kill Alan Finch, if he had just if the mayor had killed him or something, and Wesley had gone investigate this murder, it would have been, hey, the mayor wants to become a big snake.
Probably.
That's what we're thinking.
Yeah. But
makes sense to me.
But yeah, Wesley is right. I mean, he's doing it for selfish reasons because he wants.
He's right for the wrong reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if Giles was the only watcher, and he said, maybe we should check this out, even if the girls were trying to cover up, they would still take that direction from Giles better. Because Wesley's not Giles, and so they're not, especially Buffy's not gonna listen. She's always gonna push back.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of things here. We've got Wesley trying to, force his way into this role he's suddenly been given. And then the girls wanting to stay as far away from this situation as possible, so... But I
Faith is all for it. Faith is like, let's go investigate.
They're both terrible liars. Buffy looks so hangdog, and nobody's like, why do you look so guilty right now, dude?
Yeah.
And Faith is overcompensating. What a mess.
Oh, yeah.
And then Cordy comes in.
Cordy does come in, yeah. I do want to know, how old is Wesley supposed to be?
Well, I looked it up.
More than 24.
Really? I think Alexis looks his age. He's 32 or 33 at the time of this episode. And he's a gorgeous 30-something, but I don't think Wesley's as young as, I don't know. Maybe he's a few years younger than Wesley. Maybe Wesley's a few years younger than Alexis, but I think he looks about 30, so.
I always thought they tried to play him as someone who was very green at this. And not just because I always imagined they tried to put Giles in his 40s-ish, somewhere around there, despite what Tony may or may not have, definitely was at that time. Talking about him like he's fucking immortal.
Giles and I are the same age.
Yeah.
Right, so, I always read him as younger, but still, obviously, super inappropriate when it comes to Cordy.
I was thinking that Wesley was, maybe 23, 24.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's still kind of creepy that he's into Cordy, except for the fact that Cordelia looks so much older than she's supposed to be. And by next season, when she's on Angel, they will be giving her that vague 20-something, and they kind of never mention what her age is.
Right. She goes into bars and stuff, and nobody ever hand waves getting her a fake ID. And and you can tell it's so much because Eliza's in the scene. And Eliza's like 17 at this point.
And looks
and
at
Charisma's 29. And it shows so much. The age difference shows so much.
I mean, obviously, they also tried to dress Cordelia as looking older and like she could have actually been a teacher just to just to have the joke play properly.
But she's always really well put together, so I think it scans.
Yeah.
And on the subject of her outfit,
it doesn't look out of place for Cordelia, but also if you like compare what she was wearing in the last episode where it was like the really short skirt and the halter top, it is a bit more teacherly than
she is dressed primly.
Yes.
Which is like what struck me. She's wearing that sweater and that incredible pleated skirt, which is very on trend now. Oh, I love that skirt so much.
Cordelia's
this is one of my
clothes are
favorite Cordelia outfits.
classic. They're always a classic. There's nothing that Cordelia wears that I'm like, maybe a couple things in Angel, but that I'm like, oh my God, that's so early 2000. Like, Cordy is just super classic.
It's only when we get into the hairstyles that we can really question her. And that pregnancy reveal outfit. I will never forgive her for that one.
Oh God, that was terrible.
It was.
It's awful. It's like the worst outfit ever.
That was costumers being like, oh my God, we have to dress a pregnant woman. What are we going to do?
Dress a pregnant woman like she's a brothel madam. Not that you can't have a pregnant brothel madam. I'm just saying. No shade on brothel madams.
I love the phrase "book me."
Yes.
Something I use quite frequently.
How many, is this only the second time we've had anybody come in and ask for books? The third, two of them being Cordelia? Because you had Jonathan and random extra asking for some books at one point.
We also had Owen looking for Emily Dickinson.
4 times.
Yeah.
In 3 seasons, that's not that bad.
And 2 of them were Cordelia.
I am wondering if one of the reasons why Wesley immediately thinks that Cordelia is a teacher because of how disrespectfully Cordelia speaks to Giles.
Truth.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a member of the gang now, and she's sort of a salty person, and of course she's just like, Giles, give me the thing. Like, she's not...
And maybe he assumes no student would actually come in looking for a book.
Right, because it doesn't seem like Cordelia's like that with the rest of her teachers, you know? And this librarian guy to her isn't a librarian. I mean, he has books, and she needs books, but he's also Giles, you know?
Giles, yeah.
He's Giles.
Yeah.
Young Wesley is apparently Martin Creef from Cabin Pressure because I'm your commander now.
Yeah. I'm the supreme commander of this library.
I really have to get into Cabin Pressure
yes,
so
you
I
do.
know what all these references
Yes, you
really
do.
It's pretty
You really
obscure,
do.
but like, watch the damn, just listen to it. It's just freaking amazing. I was meaning all y'all out in listener land. Just find it and listen to it because it's great.
Yeah, you can get through it in like 12 hours, I think.
They're
it's
half
not
an hour
that long.
episodes. They're lovely.
Yeah.
It's Benedict Cumberbatch's very best acting role, in my opinion.
Yeah. But yeah, Wesley's line of I'm your commander now, as soon as he said that, I'm like, oh my God, he's Martin Crave. Everything makes sense now. But Faith takes off, and then Buffy takes off after her, because Buffy really wants Faith to confess. It's really hurting Buffy how badly things are going.
I don't get if does she want her to confess to Giles and Wesley or to the police? Because that's the stupidest thing ever.
No, I think she wants her to talk to Giles.
Yeah.
She does not want her to talk to Wesley.
If they had talked to Giles in the first place, he would have been way better at hiding the body. Because that was all Faith saying about John. Like, Giles would have known where to bury the body, and he would have done it. You know, he would have done it.
Giles just would have been good to talk to because Giles helped kill several of his friends.
As you do.
Again, I think we have that. Well, first and foremost, just put him in one of the many empty graves in Sunnydale cemeteries.
Yeah.
No, many empty graves.
I mean, Faith just does a horrible job of disposing of the body.
She does. Again, we've got that Buffy tone deafness where, and it's a couple of things, where she would have gone to Giles, but that's because she trusts that Giles has her best interests in mind. Where would Faith get that idea about anybody in the gang? again, because they have not done very good by her.
I will say that I believe in this episode, every single person fails Faith, with the exception of 2 people, Angel and, surprisingly, Xander. And we will get into that later. Oh boy, will we get into that later.
And I will only give you Xander on that. But
Okay, we will get there. But yeah, Buffy, it all seems to be concentrated on Buffy's guilt in the situation, and Faith should be feeling what Buffy is feeling. And instead of trying to get Faith into Buffy's shoes, Buffy needs to be in Faith's shoes, because Faith is the one who actually did this.
I know we're expecting a lot of these teenagers being like crisis counselors, but still.
And as much as I love Buffy, like she is beloved to me, this is in character with Buffy. She often does this throughout the series. She gets kind of blind to everything else but her immediate crisis. That's why she leaves at the end of season 2. That's why, I mean, there are many reasons, and I would have left too, but she gets a little blind to things, and you'll see it throughout the series.
We could also take this episode and compare it to Dead Things, when Buffy believes she's killed Katrina. She's immediately going to turn herself into the police for it. So Buffy she's already kind of been in this mindset. Maybe she's also planning to do it because of all of her despair. We will get there eventually. But Buffy definitely is pushing Faith in a way that, yeah, they should talk to Giles. That is the one person that they should talk to, because Giles would understand, maybe, because we'll get into more of Giles later.
And I totally see where Faith is coming from, and she's totally let down by everyone, but she does really push at Buffy for the secrecy, and there's a little bit of bullying, and they're like, Buffy, you can't do this. It'll, so it's feeding into itself. But yeah, but Buffy just, I love her, but yeah.
Faith leaves, and so Buffy ends up going to Willow, and I gotta say, Willow's hair is in a super, super cute phase.
It really is.
I love Willow's hair in this episode. And I don't usually, pay that much attention to this stuff, but she looks great.
We love when you do pay attention to it.
I know.
No, she has beautiful hair.
No, her hair in this episode is just great. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it when she first cut it, but sometimes, when you first get a haircut, you need to let it grow out a little bit to, get super cute. And I do think for the rest of this season, Willow's got a really cute hair going on.
And it's so shiny, and it just falls, and obviously hairdresser, but you know what I mean? It's just, but it's casually lovely. It's good hair.
And last episode, didn't someone ask why Willow wasn't working with Michael to try to derail him?
Yes.
She certainly is.
Yes, she is. It's
Yes.
just we don't get to see him ever again.
No, but he gets mentioned, so that's something.
And she is still at this point we were just like, well, that's the last time you'll talk about Willow. We were slightly flawed in our logic there, but we don't hear about it much. So, ever again. And then there's a lot of passive-aggressive tension there.
There is a lot of passive-aggressive tension because nobody wants to talk to each other about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we get Angel lurking, which is what Angel does best.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm confused about the timeline because it was supposed to be the night before that all of this happened. I'm sure Faith was panicking and maybe didn't weigh the body too well, but usually when you dump a body, it does take a couple of days to resurface.
Yeah.
And if someone's missing, they don't start dragging I'm sure it just floated up to the top and some boat person saw it, some fisher person, but...
Yeah. No, I'm just convinced that Faith did just a spectacularly bad job of weighing the body down.
And just how quick, and I don't really get how quickly they were able to find the actual murder site. That kind of doesn't... I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of blood in Sunnydale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the cops are generally, really not very on the ball, so...
Well, I think part of that might be the mayor kind of
covering things up.
makes things them not but also like the woman heard a man scream and Alan Finch didn't scream at all.
Like-
So I'm wondering if it's one of those situations where the eyewitness account is like she heard some other dude screaming.
As he got murdered by a vampire.
Or maybe
Yeah.
a
Probably.
vampire screaming as he got taken out by Buffy or Faith.
Maybe they heard Balthazar bitching about his amulet.
Or some guy just wandering around screaming, "It's Sunnydale." Who knows?
Yeah, that is true. But yeah, I know why they made it the night before so that they could, have it like the immediate aftermath of all of this, but
Mhm.
it just
Yeah.
doesn't feel like enough time has passed for this investigation or even for the way Buffy and Faith are feeling. I feel like it feels
Yeah.
like it's festered a little more than just a day.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that scene was
Yeah.
added a bit later and they didn't really think
Yeah, I
it
have some feelings
through.
about the whole Buffy versus Faith on the whole situation. So, I have some feelings on that.
Okay. And we get the mayor shredding documents and getting no joy out of it.
I know, it usually
Yep.
gives him a lift.
Shredding is really fun, honestly.
It depends on how much you're doing.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
But this is also the return of the Velvet Blazer.
God, it's so good.
I know.
It's such a good
It's
blazer.
so Mahershala Ali from when he won his Oscar. I know this is, happened before that, but like, girl, I love that damn blazer. It's so smooth.
Yeah, we've got to soak in all of the Mr. Trick we can get right now.
Yes.
I mean, and the rest
Yep.
of this rest of the scene is basically just some more exposition. There is a lot of exposition in this.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean this two-parter is so transitional that it's just things have to happen and people need to talk about what's happening.
But not in a healthy way.
Yes. So that we can get to where we are for the rest of the season.
We're mid-season. Nobody's talking about anything in a healthy way.
Right, but it all, keep going.
Yeah, but I do love the mayor's folksy charm with how evil he is. Like it's always great.
And I always really did love the contrast with him and Trick. Like, I'm going to be super sad at the end of this episode because I love,
Yeah.
like, this time through especially. I mean, I've always really liked him, but I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're a really good double act. They really work well together.
Yeah, it might have been interesting if they had kept Mr. Trick around and actually had Faith and Mr. Trick have to interact with each other.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Oh, I never thought that. Now I'm sad. Because we never got it. That would have been so good.
Mm-hmm.
So then we get to the girls investigating Finch and Buffy trying to get Faith to share her feels.
Mm.
Good luck with that.
Seriously, Buffy's really bad at this. But I mean, granted, Buffy's 18 and she's got a lot of her own shit. So I will acknowledge that her being good at this would actually be fucking amazing. But
Mhm. Yeah, apparently that is not one of the Slayer skills.
no,
Nope.
it is not.
No. But you get some Detective Buffy in here, which is always nice to see.
And yes, she's very right. Deputy Mayor not having any files is really fucking conspicuous.
I love it when my Buffy is a detective.
Yes.
Although that they would remove the files from his office and put them somewhere secure now that he's been murdered is not that odd an idea.
Fair enough.
I mean, we know they're getting shredded, but
Yes. Buffy's like, this is weird, this is something we can look into, and then like 5 seconds later she sees the mayor with Trick. So I think it's the two things together rather than just the one thing. And Faith looking at the picture of Finch, and which is like the main, other than finding out that the mayor is working with Trick, that's the big part of, because we know no matter what Faith is saying, Faith is feeling all of the feels.
Mhm.
She is.
And at this point, it's so... God, Wesley has such a history of fucking things up at the wrong moment that it just bums me out because you know that if she could talk to Giles, if she could come back from this, and she does ultimately, obviously. But I get so frustrated with this episode. So I'm like, it's right there.
Yeah.
She just needs the right person to talk to.
And they see that Trick and the mayor are working together, but they don't really know what to do with that information, especially with all the other shit they're dealing with. So they go their separate ways and get frickin' interrogated by this police officer who is obviously on the take of the mayor and knows what's going on. But it's not like Buffy is helping matters at all because she is acting so fucking guilty.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, and also, they didn't get their stories straight beforehand.
Did not.
It's like, Faith is really bad at this.
Oh, yeah.
I think she was all right.
She's the one who wants to cover this all up. And it's like, yeah, but you're doing a really crap job of it.
I will say that this is probably the most competent police officer we get in Sunnydale.
There is that.
Yeah.
Like, he's not bumbling over his own feet and trying to shoot children on sight. Mm-hmm. He's actually... I mean, and he's doing that manipulative, playing things off and trying to get stories straight, but he's, it's a professional and...
Yeah.
Well, we don't know. He may like shooting children in his spare time. It's...
Yeah, but not professionally.
Oh, yeah, good point.
I would like to know, was Joyce in there when Buffy was being interrogated? Like, obviously Buffy is 18, so she doesn't need... And I mean...
I think she was...
I thought it was another Christine earns her paycheck moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, it was, but I kind of got the impression that Joyce was supposed to be in the room at the time, just from the way things were set up. Because obviously Buffy's not being spoken to as... She's a person of interest. She's not actually, like, a suspect at that moment. But the second that it was mentioned that... Finch was stabbed with, a wooden pointy thing. Shouldn't Joyce have been like, Buffy, can we have a private talk?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and also, even if Joyce isn't in the room, Buffy just turned 18, right?
Yeah.
So it's not mandatory for the Joyce to be in the room with the cop. If she is still 17, it would have been... You would have had to have that parent in the room.
Yeah.
Or another adult person or whatever, but like I think she's around there and I think she probably heard, but
shouldn't Joyce, even if Joyce doesn't overhear and hear the suggestion that a Slayer is the one that killed it, shouldn't Joyce be like, hey Buffy, why did the police come here?
Yeah.
Again,
Doyle's perspective is that because there's some pretty shitty writing in this episode or there's a missing scene. This is literally just Christine Sutherland stands around and is useless. And I don't mean useless as Joyce. I mean just like...
The character is useless.
Not needed. I mean, it's like very extraneous. So I think it's just piss poor writing from a Watsonian perspective. I'm like, why the fuck can Joyce and Buffy talk about it?
But after the horrible, horrible cross-examination or whatever, the... poking holes in the girls' stories, then Buffy sneaks out to go see Willow. And yeah, I do have a problem with Buffy sneaking out to see Willow if the police have just, come to talk to her and she's obviously a person of interest, but...
Do we know she snuck out?
I feel like there was an implication she was.
She definitely snuck in.
That's true. Maybe that's what I'm mistaking it for, that she did sneak into Willow's room. And this is the most honest moment that happens in this episode, I think, where Buffy and Willow are talking together.
And Willow's hair still looks great.
It does.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And, I don't think Willow's wrong in expressing her feelings. And she does get a little, not blamey, not accusatory. But her tone level, like acting-wise, her tone level is not super heightened. She's not yelling. She's just expressing in the best way she knows how. And I don't love that she turns around and blames herself when Buffy starts crying and saying, I'm bad.
That's a Willow thing.
I don't like it, but I buy it completely.
Oh, I totally buy it. I just hate seeing people with that kind of self-esteem badness of like, oh no, I'm bad, I'm the bad, you know. Like,
Yeah.
Oh,
Probably
maybe I should turn off the video then. But
oh no, I do the exact same thing Willow does, and so that's probably why it's a pet peeve of mine, because I do the exact same thing. So it's more of just like a personal, but you know, I think it's a lovely conversation between them, and it does show the love and support that they feel for each other, and you know, it is the most emotionally honest scene in this entire episode of totally emotionally dishonest shit.
Yeah, and I'm glad this breaks this couple of episodes worth of Willow and Buffy not communicating.
Yeah.
In like really just blunt scenes that are just there to sit there and stare at you. It's just, yeah. At least now they're talking again. I'm really glad that's over.
I don't think the Scooby Gang has really learned yet that they're stronger together than they are apart, which they will definitely learn more later on. I mean, we will see moments of them not talking things out with each other. Season 6! Yeah. But yeah, like this type of thing, it's Buffy would not have gone to Giles in the next scene if it were not for talking with Willow, which I think brings us to the next scene where Buffy goes to Giles.
Oh, I want to say something about the framing, the actual physical framing of the shot. Because, I mean, I looked it up. Tony's 6'1", so he's not a tiny person. Sarah's about 5'4", but the way they frame that shot, it's very... And they don't usually call so much attention to the difference, and Buffy looks so tiny compared to Tony, sort of... And it's just... I thought it was like an interesting composition of the scene, because it's showing distance and not allyship, which is going to get flipped on its head in just a second. But visually, it's really interesting. So Michael Gershman, you know, that's why I say there's some beautiful framing and shot stuff in this episode.
You know, that really works. Yeah.
And the lighting design in this particular scene is also quite good, because the rest of the library is so dim and so dark. The only light is coming from Giles's office, which is not subtle as far as things go, but it looked really nice.
And I want to know, if Giles is theoretically not doing watchery stuff anymore, why is he at the library this late?
Because he's still a watcher.
Because he's still a watcher. Yeah, exactly.
All my stuff is there. Yeah.
We will certainly get into it further later when we actually have Wesley like get into things, but they almost kind of treat things like Giles is still Buffy's watcher and Wesley is Faith's watcher, and that's kind of something that's going to carry through the entire rest of the series, both this and Angel. And I almost feel like this is kind of the first sign of it. I think that this scene also says that Giles is super good at lying.
Good. Glad somebody is.
No surprise there, really.
When he and Buffy actually go back into the office and are having the conversation about what happened. Fuck you, Buffy, for calling it a murder. It is not a murder.
I actually noted earlier that the mayor said something about getting the Slayers on murder 1, and I was thinking, wait, he thinks it was premeditated?
Yep. That's manslaughter. It's manslaughter. I mean, the mayor could definitely mess with the DA's office and all that stuff and make it murder 1. Like, it's not like the mayor can't plant evidence that it was premeditated.
I think the writers are just being sloppy in this episode overall about the murder issue.
It's because they so desperately want to call it murder.
They desperately want Faith to be a murderer.
They want her to be a murderer instead of... We know that Buffy has killed humans. We know she's been... and she's accidentally. With the Germans, that was not accidental. Gwendolyn Poe, she didn't know she was going to die. She just thought to get the glove off her, she had to cut off her hand and, you know, to frame and the lightning. But, I mean, there's definitely...
There was also the zookeeper in the pack. Knocking him into the hyena cage. Getting him devoured. But if we go to Wikipedia and actually look up the definition of... I just went to Wikipedia because it was the first thing that popped up on Google, but it says, murder is the unlawful killing of another human being without justification or valid excuse, especially the unlawful killing of another human being with malice forethought.
And a good lawyer could argue on their part that it was self-defense.
Yeah.
2 young girls in an alleyway and some dude Like, they don't know?
I don't think there are good lawyers in Sunnydale.
No.
Yeah. And I mean, even taking it outside of the legal perspective, because obviously they couldn't use they were killing vampires at the time because there's,
What, that's not a valid defense?
But they were killing vampires at the time. They were defending themselves against vampires, and Alan Finch jumped out and grabbed Buffy. So Faith had every reason to believe that this was another vampire.
Buffy says she thought it was a vampire. There's no problem here. The only issue is the way everybody reacted.
Yeah.
And that Faith was automatically guilty and that Faith was automatically in the wrong.
Well, I wouldn't say there's not an issue. I mean, Faith did kill a person. I mean, that's a problem.
Faith killed a
That trivial
person.
thing
That is a
aside.
problem.
It's a problem. It's not. But the way they're assigning blame is problematic.
Well, I mean, Giles even says that the Watchers Council has protocol for this. I mean, it gets so overblown that their protocol now is to take Faith to England, but like, Giles flat out says, Buffy, accidents happen and things happen. And I suspect a good Watcher, which Giles is, would really honestly cover it up, but then deal with his Slayer.
Yeah.
If this was Buffy that had actually accidentally stabbed Alan, Giles would have taken care of it. And he would have counseled Buffy through it, and he wouldn't have called her a murderer. I mean, it.
Right. Yeah. Interestingly, earlier when Faith and Buffy are in the street and talking, when they're talking about it, it's like, you killed the guy, Faith, and Faith says it happens, which is interesting given that now later, like Giles is saying, yeah, this happens, and Buffy has no concept that this may have happened before in the entire history of the Slayers.
Buffy's still got a very, very black and white idea of what right and wrong is when it applies to other people. When it comes to her, as Faith points out.
Well, I mean, Giles doesn't come off as blaming Faith. He doesn't talk about the action. He talks about her mental state and that she is unbalanced because of this accidental stabbing and the accidental killing of Alan. He never says Faith is he doesn't say in the scene Faith is a bad person. He says she's unbalanced. We got to figure out some way, so Giles fucks up when it comes to Faith, and we've said this before, but in this situation, he's the only one that's, he's looking at as a full-grown adult and not myopic 18-year-olds.
Though I think sending Faith away might not have been a great thing. Like, he obviously does need to talk to Buffy, but I think rather than sending Faith off on her merry way to, like, take care of herself, and then kind of everything that happens afterwards is a mistake on Giles' part.
Yes, he does. He doesn't do an actual verbal blaming because Giles' major, not flaw, but major thing is that he sends her away, of course, because he wants to deal with Buffy. He wants to deal with his child and comfort his child, and so he fucks over another child in the process.
Yeah, but that is the big problem, because if we think about it, Giles is supposed to be, or up until the time he was fired, he was supposed to be Faith's Watcher as much as he was supposed to be Buffy's. But so I'm going to I've never said this before, but the council actually has a point. He is too close to Buffy to act as a Watcher. He is not acting responsibly for both his Slayers. He is prioritizing one of them over the other.
Yeah, in that sense, that is correct.
I don't disagree.
I do want to know why just anybody off the streets can walk the school in the middle of the night.
I've been wondering why Faith can walk the halls during the day.
During the day, I'm not so bothered by it because Faith just looks like a random student, and I think that it could be just easy to miss. And certainly, she's not there that much because of Faith's, quote unquote walkabouts. Yeah. But this is a grown-ass man who has absolutely no affiliation with the school, just walking in the dead of night.
Maybe Giles got him a master key?
Would Giles really do that for Wesley?
Yeah.
No.
No. Maybe Wesley got Wesley a master key?
No.
Does the Watchers Council actually finance Sunnydale High, and that's how Giles was able to get the job in the first place?
Maybe.
I think there was some machination by the council to get Giles the job in the first place. We don't talk about it
Oh, yeah.
explicitly, but
absolutely.
I always thought that was sort of implicit that he was a curator at the British Museum and now he's a librarian.
Question. Is anyone except Buffy actually surprised that Faith pins this on her?
No.
No. But interesting, because we were talking earlier about how, Buffy is trying to put Faith in her shoes when, like, she needs to be in Faith's shoes. It hit me that that's literally what Faith just did.
Yeah.
She put Buffy in her shoes.
Which illustrates, as MC was saying, how differently they're treated.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. No, well, that's the thing. We say, like, that's the problem here. And the thing is, it's always been the problem, is that everyone treats Faith differently than they treat Buffy.
Because, we will see later on this season that Faith is actually fairly good at lying. She will be able to work for the mayor for several episodes. So I'm actually wondering, Giles says that she's not very gifted with lying, but is it that Faith isn't very good at lying, or is it just that Giles couldn't believe that Buffy would do that and not tell him?
Or maybe the mayor gives her lying lessons.
At this point, and we're like, the time frame is weird and we know that, but at this point, Faith is just in fight mode, right? She's never come down from fight mode.
Oh, yeah.
And so she's just in this amped up, and when you get your adrenaline like that, and it spikes that many times, it really can do some internal, you know what I mean? And so Faith is just absolutely just reacting through this whole episode.
So Wesley finds out and contacts the council and is asked to spell the word monkey, which makes me think that somebody on the council is a big Mike Nesmith fan.
Maybe that's just you projecting.
We can only hope.
Well, why do you think I picked Mike Nesmith?
I know. You love Mike.
I do. But it's a very quick scene, though it should be mentioned that when Wesley is dialing the phone, he is actually dialing a UK number.
Yeah, I was wondering that. I was like, that looks like you're probably dialing something resembling. Y'all don't. If you would have paid that much attention to the characterization in this episode and the timeline, fine. But that's a weird thing to get picky about at this stage in the
I'm
game.
wondering if it was possibly an Alexis thing, because maybe they didn't tell him what numbers to dial, and Alexis did study in the UK, if I remember correctly. So maybe he's like, I'm supposed to be dialing in the UK? I'm going to dial the UK.
Mm-hmm.
That makes so much more sense.
Well, that's why Alexis's accent is pretty spot on, too.
Mm-hmm.
I always find it weird when I see Alexis and other stuff, and his natural accent is really...
It sounds so fake.
Well, and it's nasally, like it's more nasally quality, like... It's weird. Yeah, it does sound really, 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 really fake when it's not. So...
Okay, so it's a quick scene with Wesley, and they move on to the group talking about Faith, and this is where I turn truly against Giles, because why do we need to make this a group thing? As far as Giles is concerned, he is still the Watcher. He doesn't care about the Watchers Council. And he already, as soon as Xander offers to speak to Faith, then he dismisses Xander as, arguably, you're the one who's had the least interaction with her. Well, the one who's had the most interaction with her, Buffy, is not fit to talk to her because she's tried. Willow has had almost no I would actually say out of all of them, Willow has had the least interaction with Faith. And so it's like Giles is the most appropriate to deal with this situation, especially since, as I said earlier, he done murdered somebody before. And I actually think Giles is a bit closer to murder, because there was, it was an accident, but certainly it was a bit more malicious. So Giles should be the one to talk to her, but no, he's like, no, let's talk let's leave Faith stewing overnight. And then sometime in the afternoon, let's all talk about her behind her back and figure out who should talk to her. And I find it admirable that
Willow, you can see her face and you can see the like getting it before everybody else does with the Xander having had sex with Faith.
Mm-hmm.
And she does go cry in the bathroom,
Yeah.
but I think she doesn't make it an issue within the group. And she goes and has her cry in the bathroom, which I think is less about wanting to be with Xander than like letting go and letting herself feel that hurt. And it sucks that you're crying alone in a bathroom because that always sucks. But I think she actually handled it okay there. And it's okay to have an immediate emotional reaction and go cry about it by yourself and not make it a big deal for the group.
I was okay with that just because this is kind of the last moment of Willow and Xanderness we will ever get in the show, other than a little bit of Vamp Willow in the next episode. But Willow's actions in this episode kind of, it's like when you see that your ex, you see on Facebook that your ex is getting married. It's like you have no desire to be with them, but still the fact that they're getting married kind of stings.
It's sort of like she's crying over what could have been. It doesn't make her any less in love with Oz. It doesn't make her any more attracted to Xander because that's done for. But sometimes, you know, when you're a kid, you have an idea, and it's often a complete fiction of how your life is going to go. And especially, speaking from experience, when you're in love with your childhood best friend, you think, okay, eventually this is how my life is going to go. So yeah, I think, Andy, you're right. She's letting go of.
And I think she's also reacting to it being Faith. I think if she had found out that Cordy and Xander had sex, she would have been a little.
Yes.
She would have been like, okay, that's expected. They dated for a long time.
She would have snarked on it rather
she would have
than
snarked
gone
on
and
it
cried.
instead of going and crying, because she's finally opened up to Buffy in that actually only emotionally honest scene. Well, this is pretty emotionally honest, but about her sort of feeling that Faith is taking over and she's the cool one and all those Willow insecurities. So it's also that Faith thing as well as the Xander thing, and it's complex, and I think she deals with it in the best way that she can in the moment without making it a big deal for whatever mission they're on at them.
But yeah, this scene I really think shows how doomed Faith is, because they've all gone to decide who is the best person to talk to Faith, and Giles never offers himself up to do it. Buffy can't do it because of her conflicted relationship with her. Willow doesn't offer. Xander does, and he thinks that he is the best choice because of his brief sexual relationship with Faith. So basically, it's again, Faith is all about being sexualized.
And I think in Xander's case, he's really not talked himself into, but for him, this is the first person he ever has sex with. So he thinks, and I don't think Xander never is seen going out and just having random sex. It's always within his relationships, right? Pretty much.
Yeah.
And so I think he thinks in that moment that it was meaningful because it was meaningful for him.
On the show, Xander only has two sexual partners, Faith and Anya. And Anya, he went all of the way to, they had a wedding. So he was always incredibly serious in his relationships.
Yeah.
Which is
For sure. And this is one of the only episodes where I'm like, oh my God, this is the Xander I like. And when we get glimpses of him, he makes a bad choice, but he makes a bad choice out of good intention.
It's kind of, what's the word I want to use? I don't know how to describe it, but it's like Xander still believes that like sex and like a meaningful connection actually have something to do with each other.
Sex and love are connected. Yeah.
Yeah. And whereas Faith, for reasons that are, I don't think are ever explored fully.
Thank God for that.
In the series. Oh, well, yeah. But for her, sex is essentially a tool.
Yeah, she weaponizes her sexuality a lot, because I think her sexuality and the sexualization of her have obviously been forced upon her.
Exactly.
I actually have a note in here. There's been kind of hints at it before, but I think in this episode she does make mention of, it's always just like, I just want to stay over. I just want to hold you. Faith has 100% been assaulted before.
Yeah, I can see
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, okay, I mean, Andy said that I had disagree face before. It was not disagree face. It was, we have to move on to this scene
Yeah.
face. And that's Xander going to visit Faith. Though I have to say, and like Andy said, this is the Xander I like. I think the way Xander is speaking to Faith is actually very much the Xander giving the really great friendship speech. He is really trying to reach out to her. I think he makes a couple of mistakes, like bringing up Court. It's kind of a spooky thing. If he had left that out, maybe he would have gotten further with her.
This is Xander being insightful. He knows the way to approach it is to show her that he understands, and hopefully maybe what he was trying to get at was through him everyone else understands that she isn't a monster. She isn't a murderer. She didn't do this intentionally, and it's not her fault. He tries to absolve her.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he does it in such a 17, 18-year-old boy way because he doesn't understand Faith the way he thinks he does. But it is still Xander at his best when he I think she makes a good point. There is maybe a little bit part of him that would relish the idea of, you know, standing up and being the hero, but ultimately he's doing this selflessly, which we don't get to say very often about Xander. It's so nice.
Well, I think that's the thing that we obviously do say, shut up, Xander, a lot. And we love to point out all of the times when Xander is flawed. But we don't want to hate Xander.
We really don't.
We want to love him.
Right, because then you have these moments, and you will have more moments like this. And man, Xander is just a ball of toxic masculinity until he's not. Until he finds his way out of that and actually understands empathy and being a human being and just... I want to love Xander because I love Nikki's performance of Xander so freaking much. And when he goes to that vulnerable place and when he's written correctly, because a lot of Xander's shut up bullshit is the writer's freaking bad bullshit because they think it's funny. They think Xander's stuff is funny and they write it that way. And it's so off the mark that when you do get that lovely, vulnerable, well-written, and well acted by Nikki Xander, you're like, oh my God, there you are. There's the person you're supposed to be. And this is the person the writers think you are all the time, but they're wrong.
I probably said this before, but I think the way I see Xander is that he almost always means well at heart, but he's so ill-equipped to do what he's trying to do in so many cases that it just goes horribly wrong, and he just falls into this trap of his upbringing, his culture, his himness,
his white knight complex,
and his white knight,
I don't
his
think that's
issues
what he's
essentially.
Doing here, I really don't.
No. This in this instance, I think this is all very much legitimate trying to be a friend. Really, I mean, I took a note, and it's like, I don't disagree with anything Xander says. He's not wrong about any of it. He just doesn't really know how to get through to Faith, and to be fair, not sure anyone else does at this point either.
Xander's at his best when he's being vulnerable, and after what Buffy said to him, he understands his place in Faith's life, but he's still approaching her with a sense of vulnerability because he understands that she's probably feeling vulnerable as well. So I think one of the few times on this podcast, I'll say, keep talking, Xander.
Oh,
But he will not be able to keep talking because...
No, it's hard to do when you can't breathe.
Yeah. I actually do think that, I mean, not even talking about their connection, but Xander talking to her in this moment is kind of better than anybody else has talked to Faith in this episode so far. And I think after. But, so I do think in a way that Xander probably is the best person to talk to her. It's just things go so badly. And yeah, we have to talk about the sexual assault because
it is.
Yes, this is flat out sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and this is something that And this is the first time I think that it's really come up in the show, but it's certainly not the last time. I have seen so many people write think pieces about Joss Whedon and how his terrible feminism and all of the women that he has sexually assaulted and raped. But this is just the first time that a man is sexually assaulted, which actually does happen a lot. It happens, I think, as much as women are sexually assaulted. It's never pointed out as this is a sexual assault because it was the late 90s, early 2000s, and we were still at a point where people were like, dudes can't be sexually assaulted.
Yeah, I mean, and it's going to happen. And I remember more of the male sexual assaults in this show. I mean, there's obvious the big one that's going to come in season 6 that we're all going to remember. And there's been a lot of danger around that, right, for women. But flat out, most of the egregious sexual assaults happen to men. And they're hand waved away. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying all of them.
Oh, in the show itself.
I mean,
Xander. Because this is
full on.
Yeah, and it's by Faith, and this is not the last time Faith will commit an act of sexual assault against a man in the show. Riley in season 4. For those of you who are sitting at home going, what?
Which we will talk about those 2 episodes because, oh my God, I have such issue with the way that's handled. Oh God.
Mm-hmm. And I don't, there's nothing that justifies this. There's never anything that justifies it. But you see that thing with people that have been abused, turning it back around. And Faith at this point is all about asserting power and control, which is what assault is about. But it's Faith's sexuality and the way she uses it and the way she's been sexualized. It's the only thing that she feels gives her agency, even though it obviously really doesn't. So again, no excuse for this. And I think she would have maybe killed him if Angel hadn't shown up. I mean, she was definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is no question.
Yeah.
No question in my mind at all.
So here is the strange thing. Faith does some terrible things in this episode, and she will do terrible things in coming episodes. I still don't dislike Faith.
I hate using the word damaged when it comes to any person. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like a word that I hate. Oh, my ex-girlfriend, she's just so damaged I couldn't deal with her. I'm like, well, but in this case, Faith isn't damaged. She has been damaged by other people and has not learned to process that trauma yet.
She is a terribly abused child.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon at all for children who have experienced repeated abuse to turn that abuse on other people.
It doesn't make it okay, but it is explaining why it's happening.
It's a reason, not an excuse. It's an explanation, not
an
excuse.
And at this point, her mental state really is very dissociated. The way she's...
Yeah.
And so it's just, like, again, there is no excuse, but I'm so conflicted about the scene because there's understanding, and I'm just conflicted. But I feel so bad for Xander in these moments that I just want to give him counseling.
Do you wish you could send back that social work degree, Andy? I don't want it. It makes me feel weird.
It's, I think it's interesting. It's like, we're not going to explore it fully here because someone probably needs to write an entire paper on this, but it's really interesting how so many of her actions at this point are fitting in with her total commitment to the idea that being the Slayer gives you complete freedom to do anything you want. She's like she can sexually assault Xander, she can strangle Xander, she can do whatever. She said
it early in their episode. Slayers, we are
exactly.
the law.
Well, in that earlier conversation, you see the division. It's an interesting contrast because Faith looks at being the Slayer as the power to essentially decide your fate universally. You can do whatever you want, and that's whereas Buffy sees being the Slayer, and this is somewhat simplistic, but Buffy sees being the Slayer as a responsibility, not freedom. In that conversation, at least. I mean, obviously, I'm sure we can find examples where Buffy has other ways of looking at these things, but in that conversation, that's the contrast.
Absolutely. I also will say that I think, breaking it down on a meta level from all of us, we have a greater understanding of what Faith's internal motivations are than the writers ever did. Like, part of this treatment of Faith is her treatment by the writers, and the writers being really tone deaf about what is actually making Faith tick and where her life is and what her background comes. We find in the comic that her dad and mom were awful people, her dad especially. And so we can definitely see motivations and psychology and and all those things, but the writers are treating her as this weird sexualized villain with not any forethought to it. And so that's what makes me so mad sometimes about the treatment of Faith.
I think the problem with Faith is actually, with the writers, is actually the same problem with Faith in Universe. It's never about Faith. It's always about Buffy. They're not interested in Faith so much as a character as they are interested in Faith as a mirror to Buffy.
Yeah.
So they set her up as a dark, sexualized character, which is something that they've never really done with Buffy. I mean, certainly it will be done more later on.
Yeah.
But at this point, they actually, well, when they first introduced her, they thought they were going to kill her at the end of the last episode. And I think in this season, they originally thought maybe we'll kill Faith at the end of the season. So they never really invested in her. And I think we will get much more character development from Faith once we get her over onto Angel, when we are more looking at these characters that are shades of gray and characters who have done bad things and are trying to come back from it. Here, everything is about Buffy, and it is just about setting up Faith as this dark mirror to her.
Yeah, I think in the interview that accompanies this episode on the DVD, I think it's Doug Petrie actually refers to Faith as Buffy's evil twin.
She's not a character to them. She's an object to move along some plot.
She's a device.
And that's no knock on, because I think Eliza elevates far beyond
definitely.
what the writers meant for Faith.
And again, with the writing, I mean, I'm probably beginning to sound like a broken record, because I know I've said this many times before. This episode in particular, a little bit Bad Girls as well, but this one really it's another episode that's putting things where they have to be for things to continue.
Oh, yeah.
And as a result, the episode is not as well written as it should be.
So the assault on Xander is ended very abruptly by a baseball bat.
Yay, we're happy to see Angel. Yay.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about Angel's appearance is Buffy's motivation in enlisting him. I think after the conversation with the Scoob, she realized that Giles wasn't going to let anybody do anything, and she realized that she was not going to be the person to get through to Faith.
Does she enlist him?
She gets...
Yeah, for sure.
Angel?
Does she enlist Angel?
Yes, she does. Yeah.
That's how I
That's why
read
they
it.
have that,
Yeah.
they have that
I
little
didn't.
conversation in the courtyard where she's pretending she's not there.
I read that as Angel taking initiative and then contacting Buffy and having her be there when he talked to Faith. I did not see it as her enlisting him as an actual participant in this.
I always read it as Buffy being like, okay, well, they're not going to do anything, and I'm not the person to do this. Maybe this man who understands what it's like to live with, in a way more malicious way, live with his ghosts.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
I love the Angel and Faith relationship, and this is kind of the first time we really see them start to develop that relationship. Angel tries so hard. I do have to point out, safety words are never for Wiss's Faith.
No, safe, sane, and
Yes,
consensual.
sane and consensual, always.
And does anyone use the term safety words
Oh yeah.
rather than safe words?
Yeah, but I think you can use both.
Okay, I honestly don't know. That's why I'm
I've
asking.
never heard safety words, but semantics. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. That's
what are these writers? I don't know these writers' personal life, so I don't know how much experience they have with safe words or safety words, so I'm not even going to speculate.
Yeah, okay.
So when it comes to this interaction between Angel and Faith, I do think he was getting somewhere, and I'm kind of bummed about the deleted extension of this conversation between them, where he does address exactly what you've been saying this entire time, Andy. He says something along the line. He says, hold on, I've got it. He says, you and me, Faith, we're a lot alike. And she says, well, you're kind of dead. And he said, like I said, a lot alike. And then he goes on to say, you're not alive. You're just running, afraid to feel, afraid to be touched. She's in somehow fight and flight mode.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
And he sees that. I'm of the opinion that he absolutely would have been able to steer this ship in the right direction, but
that is pointed out in, I believe it's Sanctuary. That's the episode of Angel where he said, I was getting through to her, but then some stupid British guy came in and made her not trust anyone.
I'm not saying he doesn't get through to her a little bit at the end of the conversation, but I think the tactics for me are really flawed. I think David's a little wooden in that first scene. And the use of the words a taste, now she has a taste for it. Like, I'm like, what does that even mean?
I have a serious problem with that part of the discussion.
And it was an accidental thing, and it doesn't immediately give you a taste for, like, human death. I mean, obviously, doing what she did to Xander, yes, maybe, slightly.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Angel has broken in on her choking the life out of Xander. So she is kind of playing with this whole I can take human life thing. And granted, I think a lot of it is, at least at this point, it is she's in shock and she's not dealing with her issues. And I think she never gets the chance to deal with her issues. And maybe if she had, she wouldn't have gone down this path. But it is kind of this whole idea, well, I already murdered somebody, so I might as well lean into being the bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my problem is that Angel seems to generalize this. And he says, the way the conversation goes, he's clearly saying, once you kill, you now have a taste for killing. And it's like, no. I mean, you may be right with Faith, given what just happened. But that worldview that if you kill someone, now you're, like, somehow just fine with killing people. I have a serious problem with that.
And they're going to characterize Faith with this whole taste for killing all the way on to Angel when they work out their shit, and it's it's going to be a characterization and a character trait for her. But I just think it's flawed logic, and I think Angel really does care about the situation and he really does want to understand Faith, but he does it when she's chained to a wall and they continue to lecture her instead of talk to her. That is my issue here. Xander actually tried to talk to her instead of lecture her.
Yeah.
And I still feel there's an element here, even though, like, I love Angel's and Faith's relationship. I will continue to love Angel and Faith's relationship. So it's not really a matter of that. Again, I think it's just clunky expositional episode. And
yeah, I think with the way they approach it, I think it's an empathy versus sympathy thing.
Yeah.
Because Xander approaches with, and before I continue, which one's which? It's empathy in general and sympathy if you've experienced it.
No,
other way around.
Right. Xander approaches with, he's empathetic. Whereas Angel understands, so he comes with sympathy, and I think that changes the way they approach it. I do, I'm with y'all on the taste for it thing, but he did just barge in on her trying to murder someone.
Yeah.
No, I definitely think that's kind of the main issue with that. So this scene is broken up by a quick scene of the mayor and Trix seeing that the Slayers were there, so they're planning to take them out, which there's not really a whole lot to say about that, I don't think.
No, except that now everyone knows who the players are and what side they're on.
That is, yeah.
This finally everything falls into place, and the bad guys know who the good guys are, and vice versa. So that's about it.
Right,
It's functional.
but the mayor does say something like, "Oh, we have to escalate the," and the smartest thing here to do, and this is just my supervillain talking. You find the Slayers, you take them out, but you make it look like they ran from the crime. You know what I mean? Like they ran away. and so you don't hear from them again because they ran away, much like Buffy did Leo. Like, it's the best planning here is to take them out really fast, not a big fight.
Yeah.
Basically kill them, bury the bodies, and make everybody think that they ran away because of the Ellen Finch thing. That is the good planning.
It's Sunnydale. It's Sunnydale. Nobody's going to pay attention.
I'm just saying that I'm a better crime planner than most. That's what I'm pointing out here.
Okay, well, fine. Yes.
Well, we get back into Angel and Faith, and it's kind of just a continuation of the last scene. But I do have to point out, oh my god, I hope Evil takes MasterCard is like the worst line ever.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Oh, it's so cheesy.
Yeah.
Even though like Angel is kind of not doing the best here, I do love the start of the Angel and Faith relationship, and I like seeing this Angel. This is more getting into Angel, the series Angel, because this is a scene where, except for the fact we have a brief little bit between him and Buffy, this is Angel as being written as more than Buffy's boy toy, which we have not gotten in 3 seasons of this show. Because even when he was Angelus, it was still all about Buffy. This is a scene that is about Angel and Faith. And this is when I like Angel as a character. I like when he deals with anybody but Buffy.
Yeah.
It's a fair point.
Well, just take her off the show. We don't need her. She's
Well, I mean, we take Angel off the show and then everything's all hunky-dory.
True. I did know one.
Is there a ship named
Fangle?
Is there a ship named Fangle?
You know, at
That's
the
a total
time
lake.
these shows were going on, we did not
That's a
have
lot.
ship names for this.
We did not know.
Spuffy
It was
was
all
the very first one that had a ship name. Now we've named the ships because people love to portmanteau, but we didn't have Fuffy. We didn't have Twillo. You know, Spuffy was the first, maybe in any fandom, one of the first major ones where they actually were fans. The fandom actually ship named it.
Yeah,
And
I'll have to look into that.
I think it was Spuffy.
The way I remember it back in the mailing list days, because that's how long ago it was, we were using mailing lists. When we used to post fanfic and you would have like your characters, like all of your pairings, the way we would do it is we would just have initials. Like it would be like B/A or, you know, S/X. Because God, there was a lot of Spike and
The
Xander.
good old days.
Yeah. And that was the way it was always put up. Like it was not portmanteaus. So.
Yeah, no, I remember that because it was. So if you were talking about a ship, it would be, and this still holds true. It would be this person with the slash plus this person, and I'm not talking about slash like male slash but just in terms of, you can even see it still on AO3. You know, it's Oz/Willow, but when it was a friendship thing, it would be like Buffy X Willow. You know what I mean? Or Buffy with the ampersand. So. Yeah, no, we weren't portmanteauing, and I think one of the very first portmanteaus was Spuffy, because the community started calling it Spuffy pretty early.
One thing about this scene that caught my attention, when Angel's talking about what it's like to take a life to Faith, he talks about how, you know, the power of that and how you're snuffing out the potential of someone. I was reminded, strangely, of the original conception of the Weeping Angels on Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah.
Because their whole thing, before they just became Monster of the Week, was that what they do is they send you back in time and eat the potential of the life you would have had.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting. It's like, and like clearly this is like way before Stephen Moffat, you know, was going to write that. And it's like, interesting.
But this scene ends out very abruptly, as almost like with the last scene, because we have the Watchers coming in and they take out Angel and grab Faith. I do want to know, why the fuck don't the Watchers kill Angel? I mean, I know he's got plot armor, but like seriously, they throw a net on him.
The net is
Yeah.
Because the Watchers Council is stupid. I mean, that's basically where we get every time with.
as we will see as this abduction of Faith continues.
Yes. Because that is what we get into next, and that's Faith locked up in the back of a van, and there's only 2 watchers, and one of them's Wesley, so that means there's a watcher and a half. And I'm wondering why the fuck in Sanctuary they bring in like a watcher wet team, like that are specifically like trained to one. Oh no, they come in Who Are You?
Yes.
Because they first abduct
Yeah, right.
Buffy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But they're trained to like abduct people, to execute them. They have all of their affairs in order, so if a situation like happened with Faith happens, they're expendable.
I think at this point they're still just trying to transport her to England not to kill her. I don't think their intention with taking her to England at this point is to kill her.
I don't believe
Okay,
that
I
at
think-
all. I believe that they were
I
entirely
think Wesley thinks that she's going to England to get help.
Yes, I believe that. I believe that Giles thinks that there's always like the Watchers, will help out Slayers. But based on what we've said previously, based on what I've said previously, how I think that the Cruciatum is about executing Slayers who are getting too uppity when they get older, then why the fuck would the Watchers Council lock up a Slayer and actually take the time to get them battle ready when it's a lot easier to execute them and start fresh?
Well, because they don't think things through. So, assuming that what they sent this person, this single or 1 or 2 people they sent this particular time to deal with Faith are along the same vein as who they sent in Who Are You, begs the question, Wesley capitulates too quickly. But if these are the kind of people who have their affairs in order and they know on these missions they're going to die, does he just not know about this part of the Watchers Council?
I mean, maybe. No, he must, because actually he brings it up in Angel when they come over to take Faith. So he must know by this point, because he's not going to be working for them for much longer.
No.
I think Wesley learns more about the Watchers Council. I think he's just really damn naive at this point, and actually thinks that they're sending her to England for rehabilitation. Wesley screws up, but Wesley is. I think this shows him how bad this is. This first action in Shady Watcher Camp. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm not making the point very well, but
Yeah, no, you don't believe that Wesley had really malicious intent in
no,
the scene, which I
think
agree
he's
with.
Stupid, but I think the more he knows, then the more Giles probably tells him off screen. He starts to distrust the Watchers Council, and by the end of the season, he's helping, in his bad Wesley way. But and I think his father hid a lot of what the Watchers Council really was from him, because we'll see his fake version of his father like seasons and seasons away. But I think
Obviously, since Wesley is a character that will be a main character over on Angel, and he's somebody that we will come to like quite a bit, we want to believe the best about him. Of course, we will also see on Angel that Wesley is still, even though he's a good person, he does do some very questionable things. Granted, a lot of that comes from his trauma, but I don't know, some
I
arguments
think
could be
Wesley
made.
would have done well in the village in Hot Fuzz. A lot of what he does is never for the greater good. For the greater good.
Yes.
okay, no, I just
Yes.
want to watch.
That's a
Hot Fuzz,
crossover.
so that's it.
Oh, everyone should watch Hot Fuzz.
All the time.
Often.
Yeah.
And I do.
So my question is, Wesley comes in and says, I am acting on behalf of the Watchers Council of England. Are there other Watchers Councils?
I don't know.
Aren't they all
honestly.
white?
I mean,
The
I'm
Watchers-
because I so my reasoning, it's like, so here's my note, because I just went, what the wah? And it's like, okay, so that seems odd. Are there other regional Watchers Councils? How does the one from England have any kind of jurisdiction in the US? And to be entirely circular, if they don't respect national boundaries, why do they call themselves the Watchers Council of England?
I know what it is. I know what it is. It's because this is going to be mind-blowing for everybody. There's 2 Watchers Councils. There's one in England and there's one in France. And the one in England deals with Slayers, and then the one in France deals with Immortals, because freaking Highlander crossover.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess the
I
Watchers
was gonna
Council
go
in
with
England.
I was gonna go with one in Africa, but I like that too.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I if they're going to be based anywhere, I would have thought Africa, but
Well, they're British people, so they're obviously stupid colonizers.
Oh my god, thank you. Because I was like, come on, someone say colonizers. Because let's be real.
yay!
They're not all. Anyway,
They're either all British or they're all pretending to be British.
or they're all
we only
Anglophiles.
We only ever see British Watchers. I mean, originally, Wesley was supposed to be basically Michael J. Fox, but then
is Travers English?
Thought he was.
His accent is not
It's
particularly,
not particularly
English. So, I don't know. I figure they're either all English or they're like that guy who was an expert on the royal wedding who's actually from like Rhode Island.
Jersey?
But he changed he's from like Rhode Island and he moved to England. He's been Anglophile since childhood and he changed his name to this weird hyphenated thing. He has multiple names because he's now like more English than English people. And it's really hilarious.
Like Cordy, he likes a man with 2 last names.
I love that line.
Yeah.
Well, Harris
She's so
Yulin
good.
was born in Los Angeles, and I don't think he tried to put on that much of a British accent. He just did a stuffy person. I think we're meant to believe that Travers is English, but the accent is not.
It's unclear.
Yeah.
His accent is more like old Hollywood, or at least sort of 1920s, that sort of mellifluous.
It's basically erudite American.
It's mid-Atlantic, which they teach you in drama school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I have no doubt that Harris Yulin went to drama school.
Anyways, so the gang briefly discuss Faith. Then Wesley comes in and admits his entire defeat.
Oh.
But he doesn't really need to, because, I mean, his face just, like, shows it all. With, like,
I admire Giles's restraint here. Because I'd be ripping Wesley a whole bunch of new orifices right here. I
think I read that fanfic.
Oh,
David.
But in this scene when the terribly 80-yard line where Buffy says, "Do you still have your ticket back to the mother country?" This is the point where it's like, okay, Giles is Buffy's watcher and Wesley is Faith's, because Wesley was just gonna fucking abandon Buffy to go with these other watchers to watch after Faith. But yeah, once they have the, oh my god, Giles is fired, just after they have that one moment, then they just kind of just pay lip service to it. And I mean, Giles is still a fucking watcher.
Mm-hmm.
He's still Buffy's watcher, and Wesley is Faith's watcher. And they even call this out in Sanctuary, where Faith says, if Giles had been my watcher and you had been Buffy's, would the situation have been like, would Buffy be here instead of me? Would Giles be here instead of you? Or was it always meant to be us? So I do think that, yeah, Wesley is that the Watchers Council's messed up, and we've talked about it many times before, but and then we get into Buffy going to the docks to find Faith, and is leaving on a boat really the most effective way to get out of Sunnydale?
As we've discussed in this episode, Faith isn't actually good at this. Like, being on the run from the law is not Faith's core competency.
It's just continuity, bless him. She mentioned their freighters leaving, and that's what she did.
Yep.
But she mentioned that in this episode, so it's only continuity with this episode. So they put that in to set up this last
Yeah.
scene where they're fighting at the docks, which I think the only reason it's in there is so that we could have a fight at the docks.
Yeah.
You have the set, you might as well use it. It's not, I mean, Angel was going to go out of town from the dock, so there's been a
That's
setup.
true, but
There's been a prior setup that there are docks.
of course the whole reason why Angel was going to leave on a boat is because that was the best way for him to avoid sunlight. Faith can leave on a bus, she can leave on a plane because apparently Sunnydale's got an airport, and it was mentioned in this episode. But
Right, but she is a person of interest in a murder investigation.
So she would get stopped at the airport.
So she might get stopped somewhere, whereas just hopping on a freighter, they ain't checking IDs.
fair enough, okay. And there's, despite everything that has happened in this episode, there's still sexual tension between Buffy and Faith. I think Faith is
There's my
totally in
girl.
love with Buffy.
In those freaking
So
pants.
good.
And Buffy's got another cool jacket. I'm not in love
Oh,
with
yeah.
the print. The
The-
print is very
that's-
90s, but the fit of it is amazing.
Yeah.
Nice jacket. Yeah.
And then fight.
Well,
fight.
before fight, when Faith is sort of calling Buffy out about stuff, Buffy starts walking away really fast. Like, she actually agrees with Faith and is trying to get the fuck away from her, rather than actually arguing any of Faith's points.
2 words. Season 6.
Hey, y'all.
Well, yeah, but we're not there yet. And a lot of shit's going to go down between now and then.
But the reason I mentioned season 6, I mean, certainly like a lot of shit will go down between now and then. We will see that fighting, sex, death, it all kind of intertwined together. It is very much part of who Buffy is. And so, yeah, I do think Faith is kind of hitting a button for Buffy.
Mhm.
And that is maybe one of the reasons why she's walking away. Because, I mean, here's my problem with both of them. With everything that is being said through this episode, Faith feeling like being a Slayer should give her some sort of pass, and Buffy needing there to be some sort of regulation. I actually think it's somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
They both have good points. They both have bad points.
Oh yeah. I just find it odd that Buffy kind of like doesn't even try to argue. She just bails on her whole position.
See, I'm fine with it. I think that Buffy realizes she's arguing against a wall. And so why continue to do that when you know that nothing you can do is going to change a mind? Like if someone starts talking like that and that whole, black,
But this is how
I'm like,
Faith's been talking since the beginning of the episode.
Right, and Buffy's tried multiple times.
Right. But so why did she come here at all?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Bad writing. I don't know.
And then Trick and his men come and fight.
But this
Nothing
is
really.
this is one of the only times we see Trick fight.
That is
Yeah.
true.
He is usually a manager.
He is usually a manager, and the fight. This is one of those things where I'm like, the stunt matching is pulling me out of this. I mean, we've never actually seen Trick's fighting style, and that's part of it. And I just thought it was a little badly blocked, but by Velvet Coat.
There was nothing spectacular about the scene. Basically, the only thing notable about this is that, Mr.
I
Trick.
know. Wherever you are, K. Todd Freeman, please come on our podcast. We would
Yes.
love to talk to you. We would love to
Oh my God, we
We'd
would-
love
Oh, yeah.
to talk to you about your audition for Spike.
Oh, yeah.
You just want to talk to him about the jacket.
Oh, man.
Well,
Can
that
we
would
get
come up too.
Mahershala Ali is also welcome on the podcast. I know he was never on Buffy, but I'm just a sucker for people in velvet jackets, apparently.
If you have a velvet jacket, you can come on our podcast.
Truth.
We should maybe tweet at more people to try and get them onto the podcast. That
We
might be
should.
fun.
I know there aren't a lot of Johnny Depp fans in this podcast, so I don't know if any of you have seen it, but he was in the latest Pirates of the Caribbean movie
Oh.
as Captain Morgan. Yeah, so but that's the last thing.
I find
Well-
this last scene a bunch of hollow platitudes, and I found a lot of this episode a bunch of hollow platitudes, and besides the scene with Willow, no real emotional connection and Xander. I'll give Xander real emotional content. But
Yeah.
overall, this episode feels so emotionally hollow to me that I'm not saying this is the worst episode ever, because we know that there are more on my list.
Right, yeah.
For various reasons. But God, I realized I don't like this episode very much, and that's what I realized during. And then you got the last scene where Faith finally fully breaks bad.
Yeah.
What do you think the last straw was for Faith that drove her to the mayor?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Because the way she leaves Buffy, you feel like there is legitimately a turning point for them. But she sort of bucks the trend. That is not the phrase I'm looking for. But as we know at the end of the episode, she goes the complete opposite way.
She gives in.
So what was the end? What was it for her?
Maybe she just got to the point where it's like, oh, everyone thinks I'm an evil murderer? Fine, I'll be an evil murderer.
Yeah. I mean, in universe, that's the reason for it. But I think the main thing is it's like we've already had a 2-parter devoted to making Faith evil, so we've got to have Faith actually be evil by the end of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will give them credit, little tiny bit of credit, that we do at least get a couple of episodes of Faith going between the two. And so we didn't end this episode with Faith fully bad and like confronting Buffy and being, it's like, I'm bad now. But that's a really small, that's like the you tried star.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to go all film buff here and question something about the final shot of the door closing. Have any of you seen The Searchers?
Gosh, it's been a
No.
long time, but yeah, I have seen The Searchers.
Well, basically the Searchers ends with a closing door shot from the other direction, and it's actually quite significant because the whole story. I will now spoil The Searchers for everybody.
Pretty old
so
movie.
if you
It's
don't
okay.
want to hear, say yeah, it's from But so John Wayne's character basically spends the movie doing all kinds of things to rescue his I think
It's his niece. It's his niece.
His niece from who was captured as a child by the Indians. It's a Western. And he finally finds her and brings her home. But everything he goes through to do that basically alienates him from his entire family. Not explicitly. They don't go, no, we don't want you here anymore. But he's just such a different and arguably traumatized person by the end of the movie that he simply doesn't belong anymore. And the last shot of the film is them closing the door with him outside. And I'm kind of wondering if this final shot is inspired in any way by that.
I can totally see it, and Michael Gershman worked on so many great. I mean, he's been around. He was around film and working as like a camera operator from like a young age. So I'm sure he is inspired by, and that was that John Ford.
Yes.
Yeah, by that kind of classic John Ford filmmaking. So I don't doubt it. It's a really good parallel. I agree with you.
Other fun trivia fact: Taxi Driver is to some extent a remake of The Searchers.
Huh.
Yep.
I need to watch The Searchers again.
I think we've reached final thoughts on this episode, and I think
What? Because we're talking about John Ford? Really?
I think we're all kind of on the same page with this one.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I don't hate it, but I don't love it, and it is just kind of like getting us where we need to be to the end of the season.
Yeah. I'm back to, it's another functional episode that is deliberately functional. It just goes out of its way to be functional rather than actually good.
Yeah, Buffy and Buffy writers, there's such a great overarching emotional tone just through the whole series, and those moments of introspection and people honestly talking to each other. I mean, they're not always honest, but I think this is like the antithesis of that. Again, I think the acting's a little off because the dialogue is basically them talking to a wall with no actual empathy or sympathy except from like Angel and saying, it's just like, I think it's just a badly written episode. It's not one I skip because it's part of this whole plot arc, but really looking at it, I dislike it. I don't violently dislike it. But I definitely, Faith is treated so poorly in this show by the writers, by the creators, by the, and that I feel so much for her, and I know we're not supposed to, but I just see this girl that has so much trauma in her background that I find more. Again, when I was younger, when I was 23, 24, when this was out, I was not on Buffy's side, but I was just really not into Faith. I thought she was just bad, and I really have revisited that opinion, especially on this watch through.
Well, arguably then the writers succeeded.
Yes.
Because that's what they wanted you to think.
Yeah. But there's more nuance to it that, I'm not a writer of fiction, so I don't know how I would have fixed it, but I just think it's clunky. So that's my final thought on that.
Yeah, I guess I just started wondering, it's like, how much of this is that, how much of the stuff we're discussing is just a result of the fact that they're writing a show for teenagers?
So much of it.
See, that's the thing. It's like that's their conception is we don't have to actually be that mature because our viewers aren't.
I think also they keep on changing their mind on things because certainly this episode originally was not supposed to happen because originally they were going to kill Faith off. And also in the original draft of this episode, Faith was supposed to have gone much darker. Wesley was supposed to die in this episode. He was supposed to be killed by Faith when she escaped the Watcher custody. So I think they kept on making changes in their original plan, and that created holes. And actually, like, Wesley dying in this episode, like, I'm really glad they didn't because I love what they do with him over on Angel. But if you actually look at him for the rest of the season, he does jack squat.
Absolutely.
This happens on Buffy, it happens on Angel, and it happens in quite a few Whedonverse properties. Whedon falls in love with an actor and can't bear to get rid of them, and it creates plot holes sometimes. Like, he just cannot bear to part with. I mean, he puts Alexis in so much stuff, and he and Eliza have, so, like, I think part of it is their selfishness, which is, fine. I love both those actors, and I didn't want to see them go, so I'm fine with that, but I think they just get so married to this idea of that sometimes it backfires on them.
Had they already planned at this point to do Angel?
Yes. Oh,
yes.
Yeah, that's probably why it happened. They were like, okay, well, he doesn't have a purpose here, but we're definitely going to put him on Angel.
They didn't know they were going to bring him over onto Angel because at this point they were planning to do Doyle.
Right, which didn't.
Right.
Yeah. And no matter what they say about we were planning to kill off Doyle, they were not planning to do that.
No.
They did it because of Glenn Quinn's unfortunate vices.
Not related to this, but there's one way to tell because I didn't know when I watched Angel the first time that he had died. And I was like, what the hell just happened and why? Because it was so abrupt and so poorly handled in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it was. So a little bit of trivia for this episode. Somebody said last week that they were wondering if Oz's new hair was because he was filming Austin Powers. That's why he wasn't in this episode, is because he was off filming Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. The second one in the Austin Powers
right?
movies.
Yes.
That's the second one, yeah. Yeah, it's Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, The Spy Who Shagged Me, and then Goldfinger. Yeah. No, not Goldfinger.
No.
Goldmember.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And the French title for this episode was Above the Law. Of course, it was actually in French, and I'm not going to try to read it because even though I'm Canadian, my French is atrocious. And the song playing when Willow is crying in the bathroom is Wish We Never Met by Kathleen Wilholt.
Can I say that I really wish they'd gotten Christoph Beck to score that instead of using that song?
Yep.
That's fine, yeah.
Because that song, I felt really intrusive. I was just like,
Oh, yeah.
That was such a WB thing.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
it's carried over into the CW. That sort of sad indie guitar rock, like, and then it started happening here, and definitely on Dawson's Creek that was happening at the same time. So
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
it's just
definitely.
a very,
And now it just
very WB.
happens on every show always.
Yeah. Since you mentioned Christoph Beck, I just saw Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I did totally cheer when his name came up in the end credits.
Yay.
Go, Christoph.
So next week, I think we will all have a lot of fun because we're getting double the willow. Because
Double the fun.
we will be reviewing Doppelgangland. Until then,
I think she's kind of gay.
she's kind of gay, or at least bi.
Yes.
Yeah, we will talk about that then. Until
Yes.
then, grr, arg.
Grr to the Argo.
Grr, arg.
Grr, arg.
We'd like to thank everyone who downloaded the podcast, and an extra special thanks to everyone who shared, liked, and subscribed on social media. If you'd like your questions or comments read on the show, you can contact us on our website, returntothehellmouth.com, on YouTube, Tumblr, and Facebook at Return to the Hellmouth, on Twitter at HellmouthReturn, or on email at returntothehellmouth@gmail.com. We'll be sure to read your comments on the show. Be sure to rate our show at iTunes and Stitcher, and check out our show merchandise on TeePublic and Redbubble. See you on Tuesday.
Grr, arg.